This isn't motivational fluff. This is disciplined thinking, cold clarity, long-term vision in a short-term world. What you're about to hear are 13 ruthless lessons organized into 5 core life principles designed to sharpen how you think, how you move, and how you protect your future. If you apply even half of this, you won't just feel motivated. You'll become harder to manipulate, harder to distract, and harder to stop. Most people believe their biggest mistakes come from lack of information, bad luck, or limited opportunity. That belief is comforting because it removes responsibility. The truth is harder to sit with. The majority of costly life decisions are made when emotions are driving and logic is riding in the back seat, silent and ignored. Anger feels urgent. Fear feels protective. Pride feels powerful, but emotions are not designed to build futures. They are designed to respond to moments. When you let momentary feelings make permanent decisions, you pay a price that compounds quietly over time. Think about how often people say things like, "I had no choice," or "I had to act." In reality, what they mean is, "I didn't slow down long enough to think." The impulse to react is strong because reaction gives the illusion of control. It feels decisive. It feels bold. But boldness without clarity is not strength. It's recklessness wearing confidence. A disciplined mind understands that speed is not the same as intelligence. Sometimes the most intelligent move is doing nothing until the noise inside your head settles. Every emotional reaction has a hidden cost. It might not show up immediately, but it will show up eventually. Someone quits a job in frustration without a plan. In the moment, it feels like freedom. Months later, it becomes financial stress, lost momentum, and damaged confidence. Someone sends a message fueled by anger or pride. It feels satisfying for 5 minutes. Weeks later, the relationship is colder, trust is gone, and opportunities that depended on that connection quietly disappear. The emotion passes, the consequences stay. The danger isn't emotion itself. Emotion is human. The danger is believing emotions deserve authority. They don't. Emotions are signals, not commanders. They tell you something is happening, not what to do about it. When you mistake intensity for importance, you start making decisions that solve short-term discomfort while creating long-term problems. That is how people trade a stable future for temporary relief without realizing it. There is a pattern you can observe in everyday life. People who react quickly often feel busy but stay stuck. People who pause, reflect, and delay action may look slower, but they move farther. This isn't about being passive or indecisive. It's about respecting the weight of your choices. When money, reputation, time, or direction are involved, urgency is usually a warning sign, not a requirement. Consider how emotions distort perception. Fear narrows focus. You stop seeing options. You only see escape. Pride blinds you to feedback. You protect your ego instead of your future. Anger exaggerates threats. Small problems feel like personal attacks. When decisions are made in these states, logic doesn't disappear, but it gets overridden. You still think you're being rational because your mind will always justify what your emotions already chose. That's the most dangerous part. The story you tell yourself sounds logical, but the foundation is emotional. A rational approach doesn't deny feelings. It creates distance from them. It says, "I feel this, but I don't have to obey it." That distance is where intelligence lives. When you step back, you can ask questions instead of making statements. What am I actually trying to protect here? What is the long-term cost of this choice? If I make this decision today, will I be proud of it in 5 years, or will I explain it away as a phase? These questions aren't comfortable, but they are clarifying. Discipline shows up most clearly in moments when you want immediate relief. The ability to sit with discomfort without reacting is a form of power most people never develop. They mistake restraint for weakness because they associate strength with action. In reality, restraint requires more strength than reaction. Reaction is automatic. Restraint is chosen. It requires awareness, patience, and respect for future consequences. Look at divided priorities. A person says they want growth, but they react emotionally to every inconvenience. They want progress, but they protect comfort first. Each emotional decision seems small on its own. Skipping a hard conversation, avoiding unnecessary risk, choosing short-term validation over long-term credibility. Over time, these small choices create a life that feels busy but unfulfilled. Not because the person lacked ambition, but because their emotions kept pulling them off course. opportunity cost is always present, even when you don't see it. Every emotional reaction costs you something you could have built instead. Time spent arguing is time not spent improving a skill. Energy wasted on resentment is energy not invested in focus. Attention consumed by drama is attention stolen from long-term vision. These losses don't announce themselves. They accumulate quietly until one day you realize you've been working hard but not moving forward. A calm mind sees farther. It recognizes patterns. It understands that most problems don't require immediate answers. They require better questions. When you slow down, you often realize that what felt urgent wasn't important, and what was important didn't need urgency. This shift changes how you operate. You stop trying to win every moment and start positioning yourself to win over time. There is a certain humility in disciplined thinking. You accept that you don't need to respond to everything. You don't need to prove yourself in every situation. You don't need to turn every feeling into an action. This humility protects your energy. It allows you to choose your battles instead of being dragged into them. Over time, people notice, not because you are louder, but because your presence feels stable and your decisions feel intentional. The uncomfortable truth is that emotional control is not about personality. It's about priorities. When the future matters to you deeply enough, you become more selective with your reactions. You stop letting temporary feelings sabotage permanent goals. This doesn't make life easier in the short term. It makes it cleaner in the long term. Fewer regrets, fewer self-inflicted setbacks, more consistency between who you say you want to be and how you actually live. The mind is either a tool or a liability. When emotions run it unchecked, it becomes expensive. When discipline guides it, it becomes an asset that compounds. The difference is rarely intelligence. It is patience. It is the willingness to pause, think, and choose discomfort now instead of chaos later. People say they value time, but their daily behavior tells a different story. They guard money, count expenses, negotiate salaries, yet allow hours to leak away without resistance. This isn't because time feels unimportant. It's because time doesn't create immediate pain when it's wasted. Money leaving your account is visible. Time leaving your life is silent. That silence is what makes it dangerous. By the time most people realize how poorly they spent it, the opportunity to correct course has already narrowed. Time is not just passing minutes. It is stored potential. Every hour carries the possibility of learning, building, resting with intention, or compounding effort. When you spend time carelessly, you don't just lose the hour. You lose what that hour could have become if invested properly. That is why treating time casually produces long-term damage even when short-term life feels comfortable. Comfort hides cost. Urgency is one of the most common ways people mismanage time. There's a belief that moving fast is the same as moving forward. It feels productive to rush, to multitask, to stay constantly occupied. But urgency often destroys compounding. It pushes people to chase immediate results instead of building systems that last. When everything feels urgent, nothing gets done deeply. Focus fractures. Quality drops. Burnout rises. The irony is that urgency is usually self-created. It comes from poor planning, emotional pressure, or comparison with others, not from actual necessity. You can see this pattern in work environments everywhere. Someone answers every message immediately, attends every meeting, reacts to every request. They appear committed and busy, yet months later their position hasn't improved. Another person moves slower, protects blocks of uninterrupted time, and says no more often. They may seem less responsive, but over time their output carries more weight. One is renting out their time hour by hour. The other is investing it where returns compound. Being busy is comforting because it gives the feeling of importance. Productivity is uncomfortable because it forces prioritization. Prioritization requires choosing one thing and neglecting another, and most people are uncomfortable with neglect. They want to do everything just enough to feel involved. The cost of that approach is mastery. Nothing meaningful grows in divided attention. Depth requires exclusion. When you refuse to exclude, you choose mediocrity without admitting it to yourself. Sacrifice is unavoidable when time is treated seriously. You can't optimize for comfort and long-term results at the same time. There is always a trade-off. Late nights spent learning a skill are traded for entertainment. Focused mornings are traded for sleep-ins. Consistent routines are traded for spontaneity. None of these sacrifices feel heroic. In fact, they often feel lonely and boring. That is why most people don't make them. They underestimate boredom as a test of commitment. Delayed gratification is often misunderstood. People think it means suffering endlessly for a distant reward. In reality, it means choosing meaningful discomfort over meaningless pleasure. The discomfort has direction. The pleasure doesn't. When you understand this, patience stops feeling like punishment and starts feeling like strategy. You are no longer waiting passively. You are positioning. Time invested early has disproportionate impact. Small efforts, repeated consistently, create momentum that looks like luck from the outside. This is where compounding becomes visible. A person who reads a little every day doesn't feel smarter after a week. After a year, their thinking is sharper. After a decade, their judgment is fundamentally different. The same applies to fitness, finances, relationships, and skills. The gains are quiet at first. That silence causes most people to quit. They confuse lack of immediate feedback with lack of progress. Misplaced focus quietly destroys outcomes. People say they don't have time, but they have time for distractions that offer instant reward. Endless scrolling, low-stakes conversations, reactive problem solving that feels urgent but leads nowhere. None of this feels destructive in the moment. That's why it's tolerated. The destruction happens later when goals remain unmet and the explanation becomes life got in the way. Life didn't get in the way. Unexamined choices did. Opportunity cost is always operating even when you ignore it. Every yes is a no to something else. When you say yes to unplanned obligations, you say no to focused progress. When you say yes to comfort, you say no to growth. These decisions rarely feel dramatic. They feel reasonable. That's what makes them dangerous. Reasonable decisions repeated daily shape a life more than extreme ones made occasionally. There is a psychological resistance to long-term thinking because the human brain prefers immediate certainty over distant probability. A guaranteed small reward feels safer than a larger, uncertain one. Discipline requires overriding this instinct. It requires trusting process over mood. The people who benefit most from time are not the most talented. They are the most consistent. They don't rely on motivation. They rely on structure. Structure removes daily decision fatigue and protects time from emotional theft. You can observe how people talk about their days. Some describe what they reacted to. Others describe what they built. Reaction-based days feel full but empty. Creation-based days feel demanding but satisfying. Over years, these patterns separate lives dramatically. One group wonders where time went. The other wonders how much further they can go. Treating time like an investor means thinking in terms of return, not effort. Effort alone is meaningless if it's applied to low-value activities. Long hours don't guarantee progress. Strategic hours do. This requires honesty about where your time actually goes, not where you wish it went. That honesty is uncomfortable because it exposes self-deception, but without it, change is impossible. When you respect time, your decisions become cleaner. You hesitate less over trivial matters and think longer about irreversible ones. You stop rushing conversations that matter and stop extending conversations that don't. You become selective. Not because you think you're better than others, but because you understand the cost of distraction. This selectivity often looks like discipline from the outside. From the inside, it feels like relief. The long-term payoff of treating time seriously is freedom. Not instant freedom, but earned freedom. The kind that comes from skills built, trust established, and options created. This freedom is not loud. It doesn't announce itself. It shows up as choice. The ability to walk away, to say no, to wait. People who misuse time are often forced into urgency later. People who invest it create margin. Nothing about this is glamorous. It doesn't sell well. It requires patience in a culture addicted to speed, but the math is unforgiving. Time either compounds in your favor or compounds against you. Neutral doesn't exist. Whether you are conscious of it or not, the investment is being made every day. Most people underestimate how much the people around them shape their outcomes, not through dramatic sabotage, but through quiet influence. Influence doesn't usually look like opposition. It looks like normalization. It's the subtle agreement that certain habits are acceptable, certain limits are reasonable, and certain ambitions are unrealistic. Over time, those assumptions become invisible rules that guide behavior. You don't feel held back, you feel comfortable. And comfort is often the first sign that growth is slow. Human beings are adaptive by nature. We absorb the emotional temperature, expectations, and standards of the environments we spend time in. This isn't weakness. It's biology and psychology working together. If everyone around you treats discipline as extreme, you'll eventually soften yours to avoid friction. If ambition is mocked as unrealistic, you'll start editing your goals before you even speak them. The cost of fitting in is rarely paid up front. It's deducted slowly from your future. Loyalty is often praised as an unquestionable virtue, but loyalty without alignment becomes a form of self-betrayal. Staying connected to people who no longer share your values doesn't make you noble. It makes you divided. Division is expensive. It drains energy because you are constantly negotiating between who you are becoming and who you need to remain in order to be accepted. That negotiation consumes focus that should be spent building something meaningful. You can see this in everyday decisions. Someone wants to improve their health but stays in a social circle where unhealthy habits are the norm. Every attempt at discipline feels like rebellion. They skip workouts not because they don't know better, but because consistency creates social tension. Someone wants financial stability but spends time with people who normalize impulsive spending. Saving feels restrictive. Investing feels boring. Over time, they adopt a group's financial identity without ever consciously choosing it. The real danger is not that others will directly stop you. It's that they will slowly redefine what feels reasonable. When the people around you settle, settling starts to feel mature. When they complain without action, stagnation starts to feel justified. When they avoid responsibility, excuses start to feel logical. This is how potential gets diluted, not through force, but through familiarity. Energy is contagious, whether you acknowledge it or not. Conversations centered on growth sharpen thinking. Conversations centered on complaint dull it. If most interactions revolve around problems with no solutions, your mind gets trained to analyze obstacles instead of opportunities. That mindset feels realistic, but it quietly lowers your ceiling. Realism without ambition becomes resignation. Respecting your future often requires disappointing people who benefit from your present. This is one of the hardest truths to accept because it triggers guilt. Guilt convinces you that prioritizing growth is selfish, but selfishness is about taking without regard for others. Growth is about becoming capable. Capability benefits everyone in the long run, even if it creates discomfort in the short term. There is a trade-off between belonging and becoming. Belonging offers immediate emotional safety. Becoming demands temporary isolation. When you start changing your standards, your routines, and your focus, the gap between you and others becomes noticeable. Some people will support you quietly. Others will resist, often unconsciously. They may question your choices, minimize your goals, or remind you of who you used to be, not because they want to harm you, but because your growth challenges their sense of stability. Most people don't realize how much time they spend maintaining social harmony at the expense of personal progress. They say yes to plans they don't need, engage in conversations that lead nowhere, and hold back opinions that reflect growth. Each choice seems harmless. Collectively, they shape a life that feels socially full but internally stagnant. The opportunity cost is enormous. Focus requires boundaries. Boundaries create friction. Friction reveals alignment. When you stop over-explaining yourself, some connections weaken. That's not loss. That's information. It shows you which relationships were sustained by convenience rather than shared direction. Relationships built on alignment can withstand change. Relationships built on comfort cannot. There is a common fear that choosing growth means ending up alone. This fear is exaggerated by short-term perspective. In reality, it's not about being alone. It's about changing proximity. As you raise your standards, your environment adjusts. New connections form naturally around shared values, but only if you make space for them. Holding on too tightly to misaligned relationships prevents that shift. Discipline is contagious too, but only when it's lived, not preached. When you consistently choose focus over distraction, others notice. Some will feel inspired, others will feel threatened. Both reactions are natural. Your responsibility is not to manage their feelings, but to manage your direction. Trying to keep everyone comfortable is a losing strategy because growth is inherently disruptive. Long-term thinking forces uncomfortable questions. Who actually supports the person I'm trying to become? Who benefits from me staying the same? These questions don't have dramatic answers. They show up in patterns. Who respects your time? Who dismisses your goals? Who encourages consistency and who encourages escape? Over time, patterns are more honest than words. Divided priorities are often reinforced socially. When everyone around you treats inconsistency as normal, discipline feels excessive. When everyone treats distraction as harmless, focus feels rigid. This social framing matters because humans want to feel reasonable. If discipline isolates you, the temptation to relax standards increases. That's how long-term goals slowly erode without a clear moment of failure. Sacrifice in relationships doesn't always mean cutting people off. Sometimes it means changing access, less time, fewer explanations, more distance. This isn't punishment, it's protection. Protection of attention, energy, and direction. You can care about people without allowing them to shape your daily behavior. People who multiply you challenge your thinking without attacking your identity. They respect effort even when results aren't immediate. They don't need you to stay small to feel secure. These relationships don't always feel exciting. They often feel steady. Over time, that steadiness becomes a foundation. In contrast, draining relationships feel emotionally intense but mentally exhausting. They consume more than they contribute. The uncomfortable truth is that no one rises far above their environment by accident. Outliers are intentional about proximity. They understand that ambition needs reinforcement. Without it, even strong motivation fades. This is not about superiority. It's about alignment. You don't blame a plant for struggling in poor soil. You change the soil. When you start respecting your future more than your feelings, your choices become clearer. You stop confusing familiarity with loyalty and comfort with safety. You begin to see relationships as part of your long-term strategy, not just your emotional present. This perspective doesn't harden you, it sharpens you. It replaces guilt with responsibility and replaces obligation with intention. Growth demands honesty about who multiplies your efforts and who taxes them. This honesty is uncomfortable because it challenges narratives you've held for years, but clarity is always uncomfortable before it becomes freeing. When your environment supports discipline, focus feels natural. When it doesn't, focus feels like constant resistance. The difference between those two experiences often decides how far a person goes, not because of talent, but because of sustained alignment over time. Most people chase outcomes before they build capability, and then wonder why their progress feels fragile. They want recognition before they have substance, income before they have leverage, freedom before they have discipline. This order feels natural because results are visible and skills are invisible. But reality doesn't reward what looks impressive. It rewards what holds up under pressure. When life applies weight, only real value carries it. Skills that compound don't announce themselves early. They develop quietly, often without praise, and that silence makes them easy to abandon. Learning how to think clearly, communicate precisely, manage money rationally, and stay disciplined under boredom doesn't create instant excitement. There is no applause for consistency. Yet these are the abilities that keep paying long after trends, titles, and attention fade. The people who understand this stop asking what will get them noticed and start asking what will make them useful over time. There is a difference between working hard and building leverage. Hard work without direction can exhaust you while keeping you replaceable. Leverage comes from skills that stack, skills that make your effort worth more tomorrow than it is today. A person who improves their judgment makes better decisions across every area of life. A person who learns to communicate clearly reduces friction in relationships, work, and negotiation. A person who understands financial fundamentals avoids costly mistakes that erase years of effort. These skills don't just add value, they multiply it. The temptation to be visible before being valuable is strong because visibility offers fast feedback. Likes, praise, and recognition create the feeling of progress even when there is little underneath. The danger is that attention without substance creates pressure to perform at a level you haven't earned. That pressure leads to shortcuts, exaggeration, and eventually exposure. When value comes first, visibility becomes optional. When visibility comes first, value becomes urgent. You can observe this in many professional settings. Some people focus on appearing busy, talking confidently, and positioning themselves socially. Others focus on mastering the work, understanding systems, and solving problems quietly. In the short term, the first group often advances faster. In the long term, they plateau. When complexity increases, appearance stops working. The second group may move slow at first, but when real challenges arise, they become indispensable. Substance ages well, image doesn't. Compounding skills require patience because their benefits are delayed. Reading regularly does